Some major developments today. President Biden is set to speak within the hour about the conflict. At the same time, Russia appears to pull some troops back from the Ukrainian border. Also today, Ukraine is reporting a cyber attack on its defense ministry and banking systems. ABC's senior national correspondent and my co-anchor Terry Moran, they're on the ground in Ukraine. So, Terry, let's start with the cyber attack. It's the latest news there out of Ukraine. It's breaking this afternoon. What's being disrupted exactly, and what do we know about who's behind it?
Well, what's being disrupted is the Ministry of Defense. At least its website has been attacked, and at least one of the major banks here, perhaps a couple. And our colleague, for what it's worth, in Kiev, says his lights went out. These are small-scale harassment attacks, whether by Russian-backed hackers or somebody just trying to make mischief. But their targets are interesting, because if you recall, the United States government has said that the Russian attack, should it come, would begin with cyber attacks on the Ministry of Defense, their communications, their cyber structure, and on major financial institutions to sow panic, just to freeze up the whole country, and perhaps the power grid as well. But we aren't seeing anything like that. These are basically denial of service attacks, DDoS attacks, and those are at the surface of the cyber structure. It's when they get to more operational attacks, when they get into the actual hardware and start wrecking things that the Russians have done before. They shut down power and lights in Ukraine for several hours altogether around Kiev back in 2015, I should say. And that was a major cyber attack. They're capable of much more if this is them. Right now, what you can read into it is that this is still a nation on edge. Whether this is a Russian probe to see if Ukraine's cyber defenses have been enhanced at all, or just a bunch of hackers essentially pulling a prank, is hard to say. We did speak in recent days with the chief of cybersecurity in Ukraine. He said since the Russian buildup began in November, they've seen 300 times more cyber attacks than normal, from Russia mostly.
What else are we hearing with regard to those Russian troop withdrawals? Have they even been verified? I understand you also have been on a conference call via the White House. What do you know, Terry?
Well, they have not been verified. Look, what the Russians did was announce we are withdrawing some troops from the border of Ukraine, the northern border of Ukraine in Belarus, and they'll be going back to their bases. And they had some really nice handout promotional video showing some tanks getting up on tank transports and troops marching away. But the United States government has said publicly they don't see this yet. They don't see anything. In fact, open source intelligence, which you can access, a lot of people follow it through traffic cameras, through people on social media posting troop movements because they think tanks rumbling down their street is kind of interesting. You can geolocate all of that and track some of the movements, a lot of the movements of Russian forces. And there's no sign, not only of withdrawal, but those forces that still continue to flow from other parts of Russia are still en route or arriving. And the United States said they still see Russian forces in firing positions. In fact, more of them taking up what they call firing positions, and even, you know, at the airports, at the fields, at the airfields, preparations to use the planes that have been brought in. So, as the Ukrainian foreign minister said today, we are not listening to what Russia says. We are watching for what they do.
Speaking of watching what they do, all this morning and this afternoon we've been talking about this provocative move, the Russian parliament voting to recognize the Russian-controlled republics in Ukraine. You mentioned the other parts of the area. What's Putin saying about that today?
Well, first, the Russian-controlled republics is not the kind of language you want to use around here, because they don't recognize them as republic anything. It'd be like our Civil War saying, well, the Confederacy is a country. These are regions of Russian-backed separatists, Russian armed separatists. 14,000 people have been killed in the conflict there. And today, the parliament in Russia, Putin-controlled, really, they don't do anything that Putin doesn't want, voted for a law that would recognize these self-declared republics. No place else in the world recognizes these republics. And if Putin, who's the president, affirms that, they would be, at least in Russia's eyes, independent countries, and any firing from the Ukrainian side across that border would be across an international border and a cause for war, a pretext for war. It's a very dramatic move, but Putin has to confirm it. And he has said, you know, let's wait, let's see how the diplomacy goes, because he says what the Ukrainians are doing to the people who live in those two separatist areas is genocide, which would also be a cause for war under international law. Never forget, Putin is a lawyer, a trained lawyer. He went to law school before he went to the KGB, and so he looks for things like that. But right now it was a dramatic move, but not with immediate impact. And what it really does is once again raise the stakes around eastern Ukraine, which has been the main flashpoint of conflict up until now.
Anything else, Terry, that you took away from Putin's remarks that could hint at where this is headed?
Well, you know, I think the most interesting thing was at the very end, they said, what do you say about the disposition of troops? Remember, Russia has brought so much of its combat power, of its forces, to this part of the world, to the borders of Ukraine, that it has left itself vulnerable in places that it generally defends very staunchly. Way out in the east with China and North Korea, those are potential adversaries, if not problems. And then in the north, too, they tend to leave forces up there. And all of those forces, not all, but many of those forces have flowed down here. And so people say, what's the next step? He says, all is going according to plan. That was Vladimir Putin's statement, which can be read in many ways. Somebody said it's a classic Bond villain line from Vladimir Putin. But he certainly likes to hold center stage and manipulate the dialogue and get people to wait on his every move.
That's the KGB combined lawyer in him. Meanwhile, Ukraine preparing for Unity Day tomorrow. Let's talk about that and the mood there.
Yes, so tomorrow, the 16th of February, was a date that appeared in some news reports as the date of the Russian attack, according to these news reports, said anonymous briefings by U.S. officials. The U.S. has denied it set a specific date. They think it can come any day now, given those Russian forces and their readiness. But the 16th of February was bandied about in the press as the day the attack would come. Well, the president of this country, Vladimir Zelensky, said, no, we will take that date back. Tomorrow, the 16th, will be our National Day of Solidarity. And so the whole country is supposed to fly their flags, and at 10 a.m., the entire country is supposed to sing the Ukrainian national anthem together. It'll be quite a sight. And I'm going to be there, of course, in the town square here, and it will likely be big because there's one thing Putin has done, which was hard to do. He's united Ukrainians. This is a fractious nation. Their politics, like a lot of countries' politics, are tangled and difficult, and there's corruption. They are united. I expect a lot of people out there singing tomorrow.
Well, I hope that we can be there with you, Terry. Keep us updated. And I know that you're going to continue the conversation now from Ukraine.
That's right. So we want to talk about the diplomacy right now. In particular, the way President Biden has really managed this crisis situation with NATO allies, getting them on board. No daylight between France, Germany, the UK, which is no longer in the EU, so that makes the negotiation even more difficult. And the way he has also tried to get, say, Middle Eastern countries to provide guarantees that should the gas be cut off by Russia or the United States with sanctions to Europe, that these other countries would make that kind of stuff up and so make it up to Europe. And so we want to go to General Robert Abrams, who is the former commander of forces, U.S. forces in Korea, and an ABC News contributor, and we are happy to have you with us. And I just want to ask you about that. You know, we are now in, what, week, depending on how you count, 4 or 5, and we're into this for a few weeks now. And President Biden has been working very intently in public and behind the scenes to try to get a united front against Russia. How's it going, do you think?
Well, Terry, I think as you've described with your excellent analysis, I think that he has and his administration have put a full court press across the international community. And as you pointed out, not just NATO. This extends far beyond NATO, but clearly communications and diplomatic efforts with our NATO allies has been at the forefront. And I think what we're seeing is a full supportive effort from across the international community, and that only happens leveraging that element of national power, that diplomatic element of national power that the United States has with our position in the world.
And it's not easy to do, either in the East Asian theater, as you were, or in Europe. There's always difficulty getting people on the same page. So President Biden's going to come out in a little while. He's going to speak to the nation on this. What do you want to hear from him? What do you think is the right thing for the president to say right now? What do you expect?
Yeah. Terry, I think we should expect to hear four things, or at least I would want to hear four things. And the first one is, as you initially pointed out, I think the president should explain to the American people all of the diplomatic efforts that he and the administration have undertaken, and should come clean and let us in on what have been the conversations, where are these countries, and how much international support we do have. The second message will be, I think, a clear reassurance message to NATO, and specifically our Eastern NATO allies, but a reassurance that the United States is a full-throated, supportive member of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. The third message, I think, will be another unambiguous, clear message to President Putin that this behavior must stop, that there should not be an attack into Ukraine, and we should allow diplomacy to work. And lastly, I think the president, it would be a nice touch if he sent a message to the Ukrainian people, especially in light of their day of unity tomorrow, that we are united with them. And that is the full range of subjects the president could cover. I want to zero in now in what we experienced here. That was the cyber attacks on the Ministry of Defense, on at least one major bank, it sounds like, too, and maybe even some of the power in Kiev. Minor, really. Just that the websites, perhaps, people were having difficulty doing business, but nothing like a major cyber attack like Ukraine has seen. How do you expect, first, would you make anything of that? Is there anything you can read into that? And second, how do you expect cyber to play a role in what could be the coming conflict? Well, as you know, we saw 3 weeks ago another, what I'd call not major, but a significant cyber attack on Ukrainian ministries, right? Defaced websites and sent clear messages that more is to come, and that the Ukrainian people should be in fear. What do I make of it? This is a continuing part of the Russian campaign to seed uncertainty and concern, and try to break apart that unity that you described earlier inside the Ukrainian people. He's trying to sow fear in the Ukrainian people, and up to this point, they've had nothing to do with it. And I would fully expect that this will be part of any offensive operation into Ukraine. And again, Russia's demonstrating that despite all efforts to deny them access to Ukrainian networks, that their cyber capability is capable of penetrating.
You know, General, I want to draw on your own experience. My hunch is about the same age as I am, so grew up in the Cold War, went to West Point then, and probably, although I don't know that for sure, you can tell me. But my point is, here we are once again confronting the Kremlin, which operates mysteriously and with a hammer fist when it wants to. First, did you ever think we'd see this again? And second, what's different about tonight? What about this time? And what can we learn from our experience in the Cold War in this brave new world where the Kremlin once again throws the shadow of war over Eastern Europe?
Well, first off, I am a Cold War warrior. When I graduated from West Point in 1982, my first duty assignment was in a cavalry squadron on the East-West German border. And I served a number of tours on the East-West German border at the forefront, as you recall, of the Cold War. And even then, we were under that shadow, but we had a united North Atlantic Treaty Organization. We had a huge force structure capable, as part of our NATO alliance, to be able to defend against any attack from the Soviet Union. But to your question, the threat was hanging over us, but but life was pretty normal and regular. We practiced for it, we trained for it, but life was pretty normal. This is, I think, a much, much different animal that we're talking about today. This is for real. Russia invaded Ukraine in 2014. They illegally seized Crimea, and they have illegally supported the separatists in the eastern part of Ukraine. And now he's got a sizable force with all of his enablers, from rockets, aircraft, long-range missiles, air defense systems, poised on 3 different sides of Ukraine and threatening them with armed force. This is real. This is nothing like I experienced in the middle of the Cold War, where it was boiling, but never boiling over. This is boiling over, and that's a big difference.
Mm. And the question, of course, is it an act of a bold and tremendous act of attempted intimidation to get what Putin wants, or is this the preface to war? And I want to ask you, these troop withdrawals that we heard about today, we saw pictures of them. The United States government isn't confirming any sizable moving of troops from their forward positions or withdrawing back to their bases. In fact, they say they see more. Well, what's going on here? Putin himself said they were, quote, partial withdrawals, but they are being bandied about as a gesture in the direction of calming things. Do you read it that way?
I don't read it that way yet. I think we need to have some verification. This could easily be repositioning of troops. It's common, right? He has already signaled troop locations, as I described earlier, on 3 different sides in their tactical locations, withdrawing portions of his force just to reposition them into other areas does not constitute, in my opinion, what we would consider a de-escalatory move just yet. I think we're going to have to let this play out a little bit to see if President Putin is sincere. And certainly, the international community has stepped up their diplomatic efforts over the last 72 hours, and we should allow some time to play out before we draw any conclusions over Russia's self-proclaimed partial withdrawal.
Right, we will see. Trust but verify was the Cold War slogan of Ronald Reagan. And General Robert Abrams, class of '82, West Point. I'm class of '82, Lawrence University in Appleton, Wisconsin. Very different place. But thanks very much for being with us and for helping us understand what's going on here. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Terry. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.